music and drugs and its rehabilitative, sorry, 1 minute. Okay. And its rehabilitative implications in the lives of people coping with substance use disorder. I know that's a mouthful, but hopefully we'll be able to unpack it slowly as we go throughout the presentation. So, in 2023, Silverman and colleagues conducted a systematic review, finding that music genres can elicit a craving among people, meaning the mere listening of a genre or song can recall an instance of substance use and trigger a desire to use drugs. This transforms those genres into what is known as problem music. This term is coined by North and Hargraves all the way back in 2006 and 2007, although me and Professor Bensimon, we coined it as problematic music. I'll now just quote the definition directly from the slides. Problem music is music which may serve as an environmental cue for evoking deviant behavior. So within our context, people suffering from substance use disorder, SUD for short, and listen to a specific music while consuming drugs during their active time, meaning during the active time that they're using drugs, eventually that music could serve as a trigger to substance use if they heard it. So the genres paired during active use are viewed as problematic music, or as PM for short. To date, in conducting the current study, we have found few qualitative studies on the relationship between music and substance use among people with SUD. Excluding the current study, naturally, we found 4 studies related to the topic. In 1986, Ludwig conducted interviews with people recovering from alcoholism, finding that indeed there exists cues and triggers that can elicit cravings. Horish in 2006, and then later expanded upon in 2010, conducted interviews among her clients who were people suffering from SUD in her clinic, finding that specific genres can remind them of their drug use, and more so, the environment itself where the songs were listened to, such as clubs or parties, can also be a craving to use. In 2006, Vandy Ray, in her doctoral study, conducted interviews among music therapists and their clients, again with SUD, finding that the clients reported that music can be a craving to substance use. And then finally, Ilan Bensimon in 2019 conducted interviews among inmates regarding the role of music in their imprisonment. What function did it have? And among those inmates recovering from SUD, they noted that listening to their PM, to their problematic music, increased the desire to use drugs. Our current study, therefore, aimed to view the retrospective experience of people suffering from SUD when they used to consume drugs, seeing the role music played in all of this. Or to quote the research question from the slides, how the simultaneous use of music and drugs facilitate abuse during active use, seeing what was the role of music with regards to any of the clinical implications. The current research employed the phenomenological method, where semi-structured interviews were conducted with participants. We believe this method was preferable and imperative in this subject due to the multiple logistical reasons typically associated with quantitative research. After all, we can't practically trigger cues for craving among people with SUD. Even more so, qualitative research aims tend to be more suitable to the subject and is able to bring forth the voices and experiences of people suffering from SUD. We gain insight into perspective of how exactly music and drugs interacted during their active use. Now, I don't want to go through all the bullet points here, but I would like to bring your attention to the 7th one, where it talks about where participants needed at least a year from non-active use to the time of the interview to be eligible to participate in the study. The literature, other therapists who were advised during the gathering of the data, meaning the interview stage, colleagues and participants themselves agreed that a year is a significant milestone in maintaining recovery. In actuality, there were no participants during the interviews who actually had a year. The least amount of time was a year and a half. So many participants, thankfully, had a number of years, if not decades, in their sustained recovery. The finding yielded 2 themes. The first theme, which we're looking at the moment, is the mutual enhancing effect, where the simultaneous use of drugs and music enhanced the experience, meaning the drug you experience. But it wasn't only that the music served the drugs, which might be expected, but it was also that the drugs served the music. I even had one participant comment to me that through the use of marijuana, he was better able to understand a track from Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, as if the marijuana opened some secret understanding to the songs themselves. It was noted that the mutual enhancing effect affected 3 different aspects among participants: their sensory abilities, their emotional enhancement, and elicited new emotions, or as is written here, emotional evocation. The first subtheme is the mutual enhancement effect affecting participants' sensory abilities. In sensory abilities, we're referring not only to the ability to see things more precise or to zoom into them, as it were, but also the ability to be completely focused on the experience. That is the drug and music use, while ignoring all other distractions around them. As illustrated in the example brought here, Remy was able to combine LSD and trance for the following effect. The combination of music and drugs enabled me to experience the visual as sound. You see the sounds and you hear the sights. Even the flower growing here, the interview was conducted at a park, so he was pointing to a flower, looks different. Like you can see the delicate textures of its petals, things the eye cannot see. So if Superman has X-ray vision, at those moments of simultaneous use, Remy had zoom-in vision. The next sub-theme is the impact on emotions, specifically the enhancement of prior emotions. Participants knew which combination of drugs and music genres can enhance their emotions, striving always to reach the higher high, as it were. This is best seen in James. At the start of his active addiction, James combined marijuana and classic rock, or reggae, sometimes both, to increase his feelings of security and comfort. So each time he wanted to feel those specific feelings, he would put on classic reggae or rock, as he states. When I started getting high off marijuana every day, I began listening to a lot of rock and reggae. I found that it gave me the feeling of security and comfort I was looking for. When I asked them, well, that kind of sounds like you're capitalizing on those emotions, James agreed, saying, yeah, I like capitalize. That's the right word. It's like, good, I'm already feeling this, let's make the use of it. Let's put on the right music and get the right drug for it. Let's make it happen. So we see that through the mutual enhancing effect, if a participant was feeling happy, they would feel happier. If they're feeling sad, they will feel sadder. And if they're feeling great, they will feel greater. Beyond enhancing their emotions, the mutual enhancing effect also brought upon new emotions. So it's not only enhancing those that exist, but also bringing upon new ones. Literature has shown that people with SUD have a difficulty expressing their emotions, as if they're blocked from doing so. This leads us to the notion that they have theory of self-medication, where people avail any duress they feel by taking external substances, something that is prominently seen among people with SUD, and we'll touch upon that with the next second theme we get into. So what participants do was to consume drugs to open themselves emotionally. This is exemplified with the following from Kate, who wanted to open herself emotionally, so she took LSD and listened to trance. The combination of LSD and techno would open me up emotionally. Due to its ability to alter consciousness, the music and drugs allowed me to express new emotions, believing that would increase my spiritual growth. Getting now to the second theme, which is music cessation. It's difficult to say when exactly, but at a specific time during participants' active use, music stopped being relevant to the substance use, even bothering the experience of using drugs. At this point, the whole pursuit is focused on acquiring drugs and using them, and music has no place here, as we found out. As a result, participants felt the following 2 things: the need for solitude where music is irrelevant, and loneliness and depression. The first subtheme explores the need for solitude where music is irrelevant. Let's unpack that for a moment. You see, for participants, music was being played 24/7. I even asked them, was there any moment where the music was played without the drugs? And they looked at me as if that question made no sense, because for them, the drugs were also taken 24/7. Recall the mutual enhancing effect, the simultaneous use is being used every time they take a drug or listen to music. Drugs are going to find their place there. So there's no point where there's no music or drugs. But what happens when the music is no longer listened to? Now, you might say, well, regardless, the music is still connected to their drug use. So what would it matter? And that's 100% true. But it's also connected to other things. to parties, to clubs, to social events, all things that are not exclusively drug use, but tethers to life. So when those tethers of life symbolized by the music are gone, the oppression of drug use becomes so overwhelming and too much to bear. And as participants are suffering from SUD, what is their solution? Well, self-medication, taking drugs to combat the oppressive effects of drugs. Hence the need for isolation fostered by drug use. As Sean states, the more drugs he took, the more he felt he needed to escape. In the end, I wanted to be alone in my comfort zone, my sweet spot. I was trying to focus on enjoying my drugs, and the music only bothered me. Notice that ending, how the music was actively interfering with his use, while in the past, it probably would have enhanced it. The second subtheme is the depression and loneliness that was brought upon by the constant seeking and using of drugs. It is here, in music cessation, that the drug use has taken dominance of participants' lives. As Lorna describes it, towards the end of my addiction, I reached a very dark and bleak place, and I cannot remember music being a part of it. It was all about the chase after the drug, and that's what consumed every part of my mind. All that is left is the substance abuse. The proposed model that we see here now is a summary of everything I just presented. So as we can see, the mutual enhancing effect at the top results in music and drugs being in service of each other, which can affect the senses and emotions, enhancing them. For the senses, it increases the sensory abilities, while being laser focused on the mutual experience that is being done. For the emotions, it either increases current emotions or opens up new emotions. Now notice on the left, there's a small window there stating the 3 stages according to Freemuth, who detailed in her book the idea that people with SUD go through phases during their active addiction. The first 3 is where drugs are more used in social events and the person is less cognizant of their negative effects upon them. But at a certain time, full-blown addiction begins. And it is here that the music no longer finds relevancy, leading to loneliness and depression, as the substance abuse dominates the life of the person. So we could see that music plays a dual functionality. During the early phases, it enhances this experience of drug use. Yet in the later phase of full-blown addiction, music then is a warning sign, a red light, indicating that once the music does cease, the person is going to spiral even further into their addiction. So transitioning from active use, we're now going to lightly touch on how participants develop coping strategies to combat these triggers of PM. Either during the rehabilitation or after it, participants learned how to resume their music, either finding alternative genres, which is our first subtheme, alternative, or by resuming their PM by building tolerance towards it, which is our second subtheme of tolerance. As PM was a reminder and trigger to abuse, participants sought other genres in an effort to listen to music again because it was so instrumental to them, especially during their use. These genres were not connected to their abuse and began to take upon new connections and associations unrelated to the period of active use. In David's case, he tried to listen to his PM during rehab and quickly found that it was acute to negative time periods. So he sought out other genres. When I got into treatment, I brought my own MP3 player. In some silly attempt, I would listen to songs that I used to get high with, to remember those moments. I remember it was like a flashback to my use, to how I used to experience music at the time of addiction. Like then, I used it to escape from my current reality. But as treatment progressed, I started avoiding my music, while a lot of new songs and genres like classical music were added to my list. This formed new meanings, where I created new positive experiences. It was part of my healing process. Classical music now became influential in his healing process. It was being used to help sustain his recovery as the connections to it were formed during rehab, highlighting music's importance during this stage. Alternatively, there are participants who are able to achieve tolerance in their PM, meaning they're able to go back and listen to their problematic music during their active time use. They're able to transform this PM and find positive aspects within it that were made relevant to their sustained recovery. Matt was able to accomplish this during his time at rehab in music therapy group illustrates the idea in this transformation. In the group music therapy sessions, we would put on songs with and difficult issues came up. But as time passed, we started viewing the songs differently, trying to evolve through them. We turned them into a springboard for positive things, not the negative things in our life. In music therapy, Matt re-examined his PM and was then able to see it in a different perspective, focusing on aspects of a song that currently spoke to his place of recovery. It is the same words, it is the same song, it is the same genre, but for Matt, as a person, he changed during this time period. As he says, the words I heard before, use, during, and after are the same, but my existence as a human is in different places. Doing different things and being with different people changed my subjective meaning songs of recovery. From songs of addiction to songs of recovery, actively helping Matt sustain his rehabilitation. Conclusively, we therefore implore clinics, treatment centers, and therapists and policymakers to help people suffering from SUD to better understand their musical triggers and how to manage them. For example, as we just mentioned, music therapy is a great tool to help people with SUD. Perhaps even leading to tolerance, like with Matt, or at least to alternative genres, like with David. As music is all around us and it's not something we can escape, even if treatment centers do prevent or do not allow its listening, nonetheless, the person ultimately goes out to the real world, as it were, and music is going to surround them. Its effects, therefore, cannot be ignored. So it's therefore beneficial for people to understand the dangers inherent in their problematic music and how best to cope with it, enabling them to listen to the music and enjoy it without the threat of relapse. Thank you very much for listening.